Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Corombos of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Really glad you're with us for the Wednesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We have more good and crazy martinis for you today. And then we're also going to have a special discussion since it is December now, Jim. And as you alerted us all on Twitter last night, Mrs. Garrity had control of the remote last night, and you ended up watching a Hallmark Christmas movie, which I think just about every married guy ends up doing at least once, if not more times, throughout the holiday season. And so Jim and I are going to offer our unvarnished thoughts. So you got two men commenting on Hallmark Christmas movies coming up later, so ladies, brace yourself, but I think you're going to have some fun with that. Anyway, let's talk about our first good martini. And Jim, yesterday we talked about the revelations that Chris Cuomo had a much more direct, much more significant role in his brother's damage control operations, and the question was how much longer he could survive at CNN. Well, yesterday, CNN, after letting Chris Cuomo on the air Monday night, hours after that story first broke, decided they needed more time to review all the new documents that were part of the state's official report on all the Cuomo scandals, and they've decided to indefinitely suspend Chris Cuomo, which sounds a lot to some people like, yeah, I don't think this suspension's ever going to end. This will ultimately result in Chris Cuomo no longer having a show at the network. Other people are like, you know, Jeffrey Toobin was off the air for a number of months too, but they found an excuse to bring him back. So you never know if this is the end for Cuomo. But the fact that CNN is at least putting him on ice for the foreseeable future shows that either the pressure got to them or they actually recognized that he was well beyond his bounds as a journalist in what he was doing there.
Yeah, we don't want to oversell this. And my colleague Kyle Smith makes the argument this is basically early Christmas vacation for him. They're going to pull a Jeffrey Toobin. They're going to, have him on paid leave for a certain number of weeks. And then when it feels safe, they will come back out and bring him back and say, tisk, tisk, this is bad, but he's learned his lesson, which, by the way, was what they told us earlier before we found out that, yes, he was actually not merely communicating with his brother during the whole sexual harassment scandal. Now we learned that he was going even further and helping, collect information for his team and helping collect, background information about the women who were accusing him and things like that. I do think, though, when we talked about this earlier in the week, there was a sense of like, well, he survived this fine, and CNN hasn't reacted to anything else he's done. So why would they do anything? And the fact that they did something yesterday, I think, is a good sign that this has reached a new level of, not even Jeff Zucker could avert his eyes any further. I also wonder and strongly suspect you're hearing more internal dissent in CNN. More people who are simply not as invested in the good reputation of Andrew Cuomo as Chris Cuomo is, and who've said, nope, sorry, this is not good, and who I think are pushing back against the network's approach on this. Again, this is much further, and I suspect much worse consequences. I guess the other thing kind of jumps out at this is that, for much of 2020, most of the mainstream media was telling you Andrew Cuomo was a good guy, and it turns out Andrew Cuomo was not a good guy. And oh, by the way, as bad as his sexual harassment is, we really shouldn't ignore the fact that he killed a lot of grandparents with the policies decisions he made to send them back into nursing homes when the COVID-19 pandemic was at its worst. The second thing that kind of jumps out of this, though, is that, when they were doing their shtick with the giant Q-tips and all that kind of stuff, most of the mainstream media said, isn't this great? This is riveting television. Isn't this, and even I enjoyed like the first one or two of those, teasing each other and, that Smothers Brothers, mom always liked you first. But, week after week, month after month, it became very clear that Andrew Cuomo was doing these interviews and not doing interviews with the publications that were much more skeptical of him. And that, in fact, doing the CNN appearances was a way to avoid scrutiny from other media institutions. Well, now it turns out, Andrew Cuomo is as bad as everybody thought. And Chris Cuomo is as bad as everybody thought. And he's been put on this indefinite suspension. And, it's conceivable Chris Cuomo will leave. This will be a giant vindication for the right. And I think ideally people would learn from this and say, oh, wait, maybe those conservatives have a point every now and then. Maybe those conservatives aren't just knee-jerk opponents of everything they don't like. Maybe they really have legitimate arguments. But I figure, Greg, I'm setting my sights too high.
The Cuomos are certainly not lacking for money at this point, and as our economy enters an unstable phase here with the inflation and the value of the dollar all over the place, you'll want to make sure that your portfolio is as strong as possible as well, and that's where investing in gold and silver can come in. For example, the price of silver has increased 340% since 2000. It continues trending higher and higher. And if you need someone to guide you through the process of studying and then eventually investing in gold and silver, you need to head over to Universal Coin and Bullion.
Universal Coin and Bullion is offering our listeners a special locked-in price of just $30 for a beautiful 1-ounce 2021 American Silver Eagle coin, which just happens to be the most popular coin in the world for collectors and investors. This limited offer is available at dealer's cost because Universal Coin wants you to own the first newly designed silver bullion coin since President Reagan signed the Gold Bullion Act in 1985. Call Universal Coin, leaders in the precious metals industry, at 1-800-UCB-GOLD to get your beautiful U.S. Mint silver coin for only $30. Postage is free, and you'll be dealing with the experts.
You can tell by the heft and the weight that it has in your hand what that ounce of real silver actually feels like. And again, the track record for this investment has been great over the past few decades for both gold and silver. So you'll also want to know that the company's president, Dr. Mike Fulgens, is recognized as America's gold expert. He's the 2021 Coin Dealer of the Year. This special silver deal, though, only available using the code Martini when you call 800-UCB-GOLD. That's 800-UCB-GOLD. All right, Jim, second good martini comes to us from the U.S. Supreme Court. You never want to read too much into oral arguments, but we had the oral arguments today on the Mississippi pro-life law that would ban just about every abortion after 15 weeks of pregnancy. And of course, some are wondering whether this means the court will actually strike down Planned Parenthood versus Casey or even Roe v. Wade itself. The state of Mississippi has asked the court to do that in conjunction with this case. You actually had a lot of chatter from Clarence Thomas today at the beginning of the oral arguments. That's fairly rare, asking those defending Roe v. Wade and opposed to the Mississippi law where the Constitution actually provides for a right to abortion. He clearly does not believe such a thing exists. And so one of the big fights was over the credibility of the court. That was the big argument from Sotomayor and Breyer today is, well, if you were to strike down or severely damage Roe v. Wade, what will it mean for the integrity of the court? That is usually an incidental issue to the constitutionality of the issue, Jim. I remember when Obama was making that argument as to whether or not the court would strike down the individual mandate, which it should have until John Roberts rescued it in a convoluted manner. But just to show you how weak the position of the pro-choice side is on this, here's Justice Sotomayor, who's clearly doing the heavy lifting for the pro-choice side of this debate, actually trying to argue that we can't possibly know when life begins, and to say that you know makes it a religious debate. Listen to this.
How is your interest anything but a religious view? The issue of when life begins has been hotly debated by philosophers since the beginning of time. It's still debated in religions. So when you say this is the only right that takes away from the state the ability to protect the life, that's a religious view, isn't it? Because it assumes that a fetus is life at when? You're not drawing when do you suggest we begin that life?
Quite a pronouncement there from a justice who's obviously aligned with the so-called party of science, Jim. But in the end, hopefully this is a good martini, given the makeup of the court, that there will be a much stronger right to life for the unborn a few months from now when this is likely to come down.
You're right. You don't want to jump to any conclusions. And in fact, I think most people strongly suspect that almost all, that if not all of the justices, then 8 of the 9, if not all 9, pretty much knew what they thought of this issue before they heard oral arguments even began. But I do think there's something really remarkable that happened today. And it particularly is vivid in the comments we saw from Justice Sotomayor. Even if you're a Supreme Court justice and you feel like you know this issue backwards and forwards, and you feel like you know what the Constitution says or doesn't say, and you know the right way to interpret whether a law violates the Constitution, you're still supposed to go through the motions of listening politely. You're still supposed to act like you haven't already come to conclusions, that you have not prejudged. You're supposed to at least seem like you've got an open mind, and you want to hear what the two representatives of the two sides have to say. Now, I saw some folks on Twitter that you could argue that very skeptical or very tough questioning is the job of a Supreme Court justice, that you're supposed to try to poke holes in one side's argument because you want to challenge it. You want to spot any contradictions. You want to spot any weak spots or something. So by itself, Sonia Sotomayor giving this, relentless, emotional, angry, very tough questioning of the Solicitor General of the state was not, by itself was not inherently wrong. But at one point she says the court will not be able to wash away the stench of, like, she basically got up and started speechifying. And that, I think, is not the proper role of a justice. I think that does indicate that not only did she prejudge her thoughts on this, and I think most of us are not surprised by that, I think what's really shocking is that she could not go through the motions, pretending that she had not already made up her mind on this. And all kinds of her arguments, a lot of people, now listen, I'm a right of center guy. The vast majority of people I follow on Twitter are also right of center, and they're probably going to have, they may see it differently than a left of center commentator would. But a lot of people were really underwhelmed by Sotomayor's thinking, including her assertion that the belief that life begins at conception or at some point during the pregnancy process, and that at some point the murder of the child within the womb is murder, and it's not merely wiping away some cells or something like that. She argued that as an inherently religious viewpoint. I don't think you can make that argument. Exhibit A is the sheer number of people who are atheists but who are also pro-life. The second thing she said was she kept insisting that I think it was at one point John Roberts, in a comment that kind of surprised some people, made the observation that our laws on abortion, allowing it right up to really partial birth, I was going to say right up to birth, but even to partial birth, puts us in the neighborhood of China and North Korea, not the kind of countries whose record on human rights, women rights, or individual rights is anything we think we should be anywhere near. And I believe in the Sotomayor, one of the opposing counsels made the argument, no, we're totally in line with Europe. That's not the case at all. Europe actually has much more restrictive laws on abortion, particularly late in the term than the United States does. And I think a lot of us, we would say, even if you don't want to see abortion banned tomorrow, I think something along those lines makes sense. We keep hearing the argument, particularly when it comes to partial birth abortion. It's exceptionally rare. It almost never happens. Why do you want to ban it? And also, you can't ban it because so many women need it. Well, there's a contradiction there. It's one or the other. It can't be both. So anyway, I don't know if anything that's going on today is necessarily going to change any justice's mind. But I do think if you're pro-life, you have to be pleased with how things are going. I think you have to be pleasantly surprised by some of the comments from Justice Roberts. And I think Sotomayor, maybe she's just auditioning to be the next RBG. Maybe she wants to be a pop culture beloved justice. And maybe she wants to be someone who is exceptionally popular amongst progressive activists. But if her aim was to change the minds or sway the thinking of the other justices, I don't think she did that at all today, Greg.
No, I think that's right. And, this is probably one of those cases that will come down in June. And I'm sure there will be a significant reaction unless the court tries to punt on this. But I don't get the impression that is going to be the result. But we'll see. I've certainly been surprised by that before. But every day we have stress in this job, Jim. There's a lot of things that bring us tension, meeting deadlines. Just the news of the day brings a lot of stress. And that's where something like the Theragun can help. You don't want to let the stress of daily life weigh on your body. So whether you're an elite athlete or someone like me just trying to make it through the day tension-free, Theragun can definitely help.
Theragun is the handheld percussive therapy device that releases your deepest muscle tension using a scientifically calibrated combination of depth, speed, and power. And it's as quiet as an electric toothbrush. The Gen 4 Theragun doesn't just feel good, it gets to the source of the pain by releasing tension using Theragun's signature percussive therapy, which goes 60% deeper than vibration alone. Now, whether you want to treat your muscle tension from working out, or you're trying to recover from an injury, or you're just dealing with the stress of everyday life, there is no substitute for the Theragun Gen 4. The OLED screen and design make you feel like you're holding something from the future. Just go to their site and check it out. And the Theragun app learns from your behaviors and suggests guided routines.
I just used a Theragun last night. The quads were feeling a little tight, a little bit sore. Just grabbed it for a few minutes and just absolutely felt better after just really a couple of minutes using the Theragun. So it's fantastic for those kind of spot treatments. It's also good if you need a regular routine. And like Jim said, the Theragun app learns from your behaviors and can get you on that regular routine. So the Theragun is trusted by 250 professional sports teams like Real Madrid and elite athletes like Paul George, DeAndre Hopkins, Maria Sharapova, hundreds of thousands of customers, and even me. Try Theragun for 30 days starting at just $199. Go to therabody.com/martini right now and get your Gen 4 Theragun today. That's therabody.com/martini, therabody.com/martini. All right, Jim, on to our crazy martini now. And we, of course, enjoyed the election results for the most part in 2021. We're looking forward to what appears to be on course for a good Republican year in 2022. But the midterms still almost a year away. A lot can happen. And kind of like 2018, Republicans have the momentum like the Democrats did that year. But the Senate actually ended up more Republican that year. And that's how it might look for the Democrats in 2022 because Republicans are playing a lot of defense. I got some retirements there, including one in Pennsylvania where Pat Toomey is retiring after 2 terms. And Sean Parnell had been the likely, I think, Republican nominee there, but ended up having to drop out of the Republican primary due to allegations of domestic abuse in a divorce case there. And so Republican leaders in the state are looking at a longtime businessman to jump in. But the guy who got in yesterday and is raising some eyebrows is Dr. Oz. Yeah, Dr. Oz from the TV show, which he does out of New York. He lives in New Jersey. He's registered to vote, though, in Pennsylvania because his in-laws live there. And so Jim, in his opening statement, he mainly talked about how the government overplayed its hand, restricted liberty, didn't actually keep us safer in the pandemic. I think there's a lot of things in there conservatives would agree with, but again, you've got the potential carpetbagging situation going on here. You don't know what he thinks about a whole lot else. And, you know, it brings up this frustrating thing, at least for me, about how we regularly, and I think in many cases rightly so, criticize lefty celebrities for being so out of touch. But then when a mild to moderate celebrity gets in on the Republican side, the party has a tendency to fawn all over them. So I haven't seen a lot of fawning, but I haven't seen a lot of snickering about this either. So what do you think of Dr. Oz getting in?
Oh, Greg, I thought Ohio was going to be the disaster. Looking at the primary there and the way that the Republican candidates keep finding new ways to outdumb each other. I'm going to try to be nice, although I'm recognizing, as you described it there, Greg, by the Dr. Oz standard, I can run for Senate in Pennsylvania. My in-laws live there too. That's all you need? Oh, okay. First of all, I'm not a fan of Dr. Oz outside of the realm of politics. Some of his health advice has been very, let's just say, very controversial and very disputed. And I really don't like anybody whose perception and discussion of health issues. There are times Dr. Oz has gotten to the eight top cures that they don't want you to know about. I do not believe that there are super duper effective cancer treatments that are being withheld because of corporate greed or because people don't want people to get better from cancer and things like that. I'm not saying they're automatically snake oil salesmen, and yes, sometimes people can have all kinds of remarkable experiences due to unusual or non-traditional treatments. And sometimes they'll work great. Sometimes they won't work great. I think a lot of these cases, you're kind of playing on people's hope for a cure, hope for an effective treatment in their most desperate hour. And I really don't like when people head in that direction. And I'd refer you to this company called Manitech and Dr. Ben Carson from a few years ago, if you want some more perspective on that phenomenon. Dr. Oz, he's a clear, maybe, one of your top, celebrity doctors, right up there with Dr. Drew and Dr. Phil McGraw and those guys like that. I think I would just ask Pennsylvania Republicans is, look, I'm coming to this with a great deal of skepticism. I'm coming to this with a sense of not seeing Dr. Oz as somebody to be taken seriously. But you know what, Dr. Oz, prove me wrong. Study up on the issues. Don't just come up with here's my hot take response on this. And ideally, I'm glad you know a lot about healthcare. I'm glad you know a lot about medicine. Let's see if we can apply it beyond. Don't just be a single issue candidate, because as a senator, you're going to have to deal with a lot of them. Demonstrate that you know the issues and demonstrate that you know how to turn what you want to do into policies. And let me emphasize, policies at the federal level if you're going to run for the Senate. Don't tell me how to change state laws. Don't tell me how to change local laws. Give me a real agenda. Give me a real sense that you can get it done. Give me a real sense of demonstration that you can work with others. And I'm willing to jump back on board. I'm extremely skeptical. And the thing I would ask Pennsylvania Republicans is don't just vote for this guy because you've heard of him. Don't just vote for this guy because he sat on Oprah's couch. Don't just vote on this guy because he's got a bunch of bestsellers and things like that. Treat him, if he wants to be taken seriously, then hold him to the standard of a serious Senate candidate. Don't give him the kid glove treatment because he's famous, and don't get, distracted if he brings in other celebrities and all that kind of stuff. No, by the way, the residency issues is not reassuring me in the slightest. Could he be a good senator? I suppose. But the next couple of weeks and months to come, Dr. Oz, this is your time to prove the skeptics wrong. Show us you're really ready to do this job, and you'll get a second look. And I think, considering the dynamics of the year, it's very possible Republicans can win the 2022 Pennsylvania Senate race. But I'm not counting on it. And I think if he doesn't take this seriously, and if this is seen as just another, schlocky shtick, I think this will probably end in disaster for Pennsylvania Republicans. And Pennsylvania is the kind of state that Republicans really should be running at minimum competitive Senate races, if not winning them outright.
Yeah, Biden's numbers in Pennsylvania, even though he was born there, are disastrous right now. I think he's double digits underwater there. So if that persists, that should be a built-in advantage for the Republican. I noticed that Steve Schmidt of the Lincoln Project was trying to already nuke this candidacy last night. So I'm not sure if he's actually concerned that Oz could do well there, or he's just trying to nuke anyone trying to come into this race now that Parnell is out. But
Greg, don't make me choose. I can't root between Steve Schmidt and Dr. Oz. Actually, correction. I'm willing to try to have an open mind on Dr. Oz. I'm not willing to do the same thing about Steve Schmidt.
No, we know who Steve Schmidt is. We definitely know that. All right, Jim. I know this is what everybody's been waiting for since we teased it at the beginning. But last night on Twitter, you expressed your frustrations there watching a Hallmark Christmas movie because you said if you expressed them to Mrs. Garrity, she'd probably throw a pillow at you. But she had control of the remote last night. I think most guys have this situation where they end up watching at least one, probably several Hallmark Christmas movies over the weeks. I mean, they start these new movies around Halloween leading up to Christmas. So, I mean, you just get inundated by them. There's 2 Hallmark channels that do it. And so it's pretty hard to escape. But one of the things that make it fun is that my wife actually lets me make fun of it while we're watching. In fact, sometimes we're texting other friends. We decide to watch the same movie because, that's the 1 or 2 we can check off for the season. And then we kind of make fun of it as the movie goes on and find the plot holes and stuff. But I know there was one specific thing that got you teed off last night, but I'm sure there's plenty more that comes to mind when you think about all the fun aspects of Hallmark Christmas movies.
Greg, hey, listeners, right now you can just hear cracking the knuckles of my sarcasm as it kind of loosens up and gets ready to work on the speed bag here. So first of all, I recognize I'm not the first person to make these observations or jokes. I think Mary Catherine Ham wrote arguably one of the definitive assessments and takedowns of Hallmark Christmas movies. And even though I'm going to snark on them relentlessly for the next few minutes, I would observe that for the first 10 to 15 minutes, I liked them. For all the griping that I'm about to do, yes, they are family entertainment. Yes, they are wholesome. Yes, they are something you can watch with your grandmother, and there's not going to be anything uncomfortable about any of it. There also might not be really anything entertaining for the entirety of it. But a lot of us, they do answer questions that a bunch of us have, like, how is Candace Cameron doing these days? My wife is a much bigger fan of these than I am. I guess I can enjoy the fact that, for about 10, 15 minutes, I can enjoy the fact that they're taking place always in these picturesque New England or Rocky Mountain small towns where everybody gets really excited about Christmas. And there's always some old man with a big white beard called Chris who insists that he's not Santa Claus, but then does something at the end that makes you think maybe he really is Santa Claus. There's a precocious child who's always really way too invested in getting their widow mother married to the town hunk and all that. The Holderness family, who do these rather funny YouTube videos, loves to do parodies of them. And they point out that it always has some element of the town hunk who's trying to restore the town gazebo or save the peppermint factory or whatever, the contrived plot line is. It's always like, he's a lumberjack and he wears flannel shirts, and I'm a big city girl who's got this busy job. Could I be happy with him? And it turns out he's actually inherited $1 million from his grandfather. So he was rich all along. So it's okay. And yes, my wife enjoys them, wants to watch them. And, I get a few comments and then she's like, stop it. And then the pillows start getting hurled. I try to give them a chance. I try to not, automatically snark. Although I do think, Greg, at some point we can expand the concept of this podcast. And I'm envisioning something like Mystery Science Theater 3000, where at the bottom of the screen, you just see the back of our heads. And we just do a running commentary during either, a Hallmark Christmas movie or one of the genuine Christmas classics like Die Hard.
Yes.
And so the line of dialogue that got me, where I just couldn't let it go, where I just felt the need to pick up the phone and just sharing this with the world of Twitter, is that we're watching the female protagonist, who once again is a busy businesswoman with no time for love. I think, honest to goodness, the title of the movie was A Christmas CEO. And the main character's name, Greg, I'm not making this up, was Christmas. No word if it's a Hallmark movie. So, my understanding was Christmas comes once a year, but it's a Hallmark movie, so it didn't arrive at all. So the line of dialogue that jumped out at me was, I missed the last 2 Christmases with my family because I had to make sure those consumer reports got filed. Now, first of all, this sounds suspiciously like having the right cover sheet on your TPS report, as we all remember from Office Space.
Yes.
But I'm sitting there thinking, like, wait a second. First of all, what for these, this isn't, they don't specify what kind of consumer reports or who she's filing this to or something like that. I don't know if it's something to do with the magazine consumer reports, but wait a minute, you're the CEO. What kind of strict deadlines are these? Well, I'd like to spend Christmas with my family, but I can't because these reports have to get filed. Who's coming after you if you don't file them? The Nazis? Like, what is this? She's the CEO. There's no person above her who would be saying, well, by golly, you got to get those reports done. No Christmas for you. And so, my next thought is like, oh, so let's assume they really were as important as they seem. And, I so far I have yet to see any Hallmark Christmas movie that refers to the pandemic. Fine. Okay. Nobody wants to think about that when they're watching a Christmas movie. But also, apparently, the internet has never been invented either, because there's no way for her to do remote work on these consumer reports. And apparently she just absolutely has to, or else this, draconian authority will come down on her. I think it was a toy company if they didn't file the consumer reports by then. It really just, and then the funny thing is that the very next one we watched after that, by this point she's starting to fall asleep on the couch and I can change the channel. The next one on Hallmark Channel last night was the one with Terry Hatcher. Always liked her going back to the Lois and Clark days. Her role, honest to God, the line of dialogue is, you have to inspect the site tonight, but it's Christmas Eve. I can't get a contract here to show up here on time anytime. You're telling me somebody's going out on Christmas Eve? So it was, twice in a row, there was something really important that had to happen in the business world on Christmas Eve. Do people at Hallmark work on Christmas Eve? Is that why they have this? The only people we know who work on Christmas Eve, Greg, are the Nakatomi Corporation.
Oh, so good. So good. Yeah, there are several different plot lines that I particularly love / roll my eyes at. They're just so hilarious. The one I mentioned last night on Twitter is the one where this person has been chasing their dream job and they've been frustrated at every twist and turn. And then finally, on Christmas Eve, of course, because that's when companies make personnel decisions, they offer this person their dream job. But now this person is thoroughly conflicted because the person they've been infatuated with for at least 2 or 3 days now is the center of their life. And they're trying to decide whether they could actually pursue that dream job now instead of maybe trying to make it work in both situations. The other one that is just always over the top is when some lovely young lady becomes like the piano teacher or the ice skating coach for the daughter of some widowered prince in some place you've never heard of, like Morgovia, and then they end up falling in love. But Jim, I happened to look, since I knew we were going to talk about this, I happened to look at the lineup for this evening on the Hallmark Channel. One is going to be called Double Holiday, and the description is, Rebecca must throw the company holiday party with her office rival, Chris. Jim, you think there's a chance that Rebecca and Chris might end up together at the end of that one? Another one is Christmas at Holly Lodge, where they're trying to stop a developer from buying the lodge. I'm guessing at the end of that one, they'll probably
evil developers. Don't they understand that these picturesque New England towns should remain exactly the way they are? Not in my backyard.
Then there's Pride, Prejudice, and Mistletoe. Darcy returns to her hometown. Wasn't Darcy the guy in those Jane Austen things? Anyway, Darcy returns to her hometown for Christmas and reconnects with Luke, a former rival. So I have a feeling that Darcy and Luke might end up liking each other a little bit more by the end of this movie. But of course, when I end up saying in the first 5 minutes, I think those two might end up together in the end. Mrs. Columbus always gives me that look and says, it's about the journey. But there is a positive sense to this. It's wholesome. The most you ever get is like that kiss as the snowflakes start falling right at the end of the movie. And it's definitely more edifying than the Lifetime Movie Network. I looked over there what their titles are for today. Trapped by My Father's Killer, Hometown Killer, Psycho Storm Chaser, Fatal Fiancé, and Psycho Wedding Crasher. So, whenever you get overwhelmed with the schmaltz of the Hallmark Channel, just know that it's a lot better than some of the other fare out there. So, ladies, enjoy it. Guys, endure it. Snark at it with other people. That's a good way to endure it. But it's definitely become an entrenched part of our holiday traditions. And I think that's, for the most part, fine.
Greg, look, I know she's going to want to watch it again tonight. I've already looked. I think it's USA Network has this other one, which is a similar story to what you're saying on Hallmark tonight. Holly has to throw the office Christmas party, and lo and behold, her estranged husband John shows up. And right as they're trying to work out their intentions, Hans come along with his own plan for a hostile takeover, looking for negotiable bearer bonds. But it strikes me as just fun for the whole family. And all I can say is when I see this network, when I see that this beloved movie on basic cable, for all our listeners out there, yippee-ki-yay, Mr. Falcon.
Oh, Jim, 'tis the season. Yeah, I'm sure we'll be talking about Die Hard in a little more detail. But anyway, a lot of fun as always. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Columbus of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. Do subscribe to the podcast. We're always grateful for that. Tell your friends about us as well. Thank you also for your kind reviews and your 5-star ratings. Get us on your home devices. All you have to do is say, play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us on Twitter. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a great Wednesday, and please join us on Thursday for the next 3 Martini Lunch. Hi, this is Greg Columbus, and I'm here with Dr. Mike Fulgens. He's the president of Universal Coin and Bullion. Mike was recently named the 2021 Dealer of the Year by the American Numismatic Association. Mike, if people are interested in purchasing gold or silver coins, they're going to have some very basic questions in mind. First of all, they want the best possible deal, but they also, of course, want to know that what they're getting is the genuine article. So what's the best way for anyone listening to ensure that they do make the right purchase in this area?
The best thing someone can do to make the right purchase, the right quality, to make sure it's genuine, and to make sure the price is good is develop a relationship with a highly respected dealer. You want a dealer that is respected by his peers and has won awards. We have had our materials named the best gold and silver materials in the industry by the Numismatic Literary Guild. And I would recommend to people that go with someone who price checks with other dealers and has expertise in the area like I do and my company does.
Dr. Mike Fulgens is recognized as America's gold expert by the U.S. government. Contact Mike and his team of professionals at Universal Coin and Bullion to own your gold and silver coins now. Call 1-800-UCB-GOLD.